I am Carla Dennis. Welcome to our monthly educational event. We do a monthly event the second Tuesday of every month. Sometimes we do a couple of events a month, but I just believe that education is extremely powerful. And I love to educate clients on taxes, various topics that appeal to my clientele, appeal to myself. And I try to drive these topics based upon what clients are always asking me about, right? If I get that question a couple of times and I think it's time to do a topic on it, have a discussion. I say a discussion because I lead the conversation, but it is a conversation that we will have in the room. Today, our conversation is going to be 5 risks to buying real estate in a declining market. And let me tell you why we came up with this topic, because clients are asking me, Carla, do you think I should buy in California? Do you think we're on a bubble? Do you think the market is going to decline? I don't know. I don't have a magic ball, right? Who really knows? But I get that question a lot. Like, I'm afraid to buy right now because what if the market dips? What will happen? So I think it's a great opportunity to have this conversation. I also have the pleasure of having a colleague with me, which I will introduce later, and she's going to talk about how to build wealth with real estate in a down market. So whether in an up market, down market, we're going to have a conversation. I think there's opportunities in all markets, whether it's the market that's peaking, whether it's the market that's declining. I'm the girl that always looks at the glass half full. I'm going to find an opportunity in something. So who is this girl you guys are talking to, right? Some of your faces are new. So I am Carla Dennis. I am the CEO of Carla Dennis and Associates, Inc. We are a full-service tax preparation, tax consultancy firm. We do taxes and represent clients in all 50 states. I am not a CPA. I am an enrolled agent, and I am proud to say that I'm an enrolled agent. I'm licensed through the federal government as a tax professional. I hold an undergrad degree in accounting. I hold a master's in taxation. I will not say that I know it all when it comes to taxes, but I can research it and look it up and keep looking it up until we find an answer. So that is what I am good at. I've been featured in a lot of media outlets. And what does that really mean to you? Well, they know that I'm going to get the law and I'm going to get it right. I love reading tax law. It's a bizarre thing. I finally found something that Carla enjoys, right? And right now, we're in an election year. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know whether we're going to retain our existing president or whether we're going to get a new one, right? And for all intents and purposes, why do I say that? Because with a new president or maybe an existing president, they always come in, they try to change up some tax laws. They try to quote unquote get the economy going. So I kind of sit on the edge of my seats with these candidates looking to see what is going to be their tax policy. What do they stand for? What are they talking about? Because by the time they get it sorted, by the time they champion a bill and it becomes law, no one would have understood it. So now's the time for us to kind of understand it. That's what I do all day. Literally, I read tax laws, bizarre, but that's what I enjoy most, right? So it is tax time. So my goal is to provide you with some education. So before I do that, though, I do have a couple of questions. How many of you guys are currently real estate investors? Okay, so about the majority of you are real estate investors. How many of you think that we're in a bubble market? Right? Come on, put your hands up proudly. If you believe that, put that hand up. Not halfway. So some of you guys believe we're in a bubble market, right? I don't know whether we're in a bubble market or not, but what I can definitely say to you is I go to bed every night asking myself, how much more can the real estate go up in California? I do that, right? So when I bought the home that I live in now, I bought my primary residence at literally 369 right after 9/11. It was at 369. And I could tell you that that house is probably worth 5 times what I bought it for. So it's just amazing. And I keep asking myself, how much more is it going to go up? I happen to have property on a really huge lot, especially for where I live, especially here in Orange County. to really have a huge lot. And there's only 3 lots in the city that are the size of my lot. And one person that owns the property, they leveled their house. They leveled it and they built 3 houses on that lot. I said, ooh, opportunity, right? Maybe I could level my house and build 3 houses on that lot and sell those 3 houses. And each one of those houses sold for an astronomical amount. I couldn't believe it. So when I say there's so many different opportunities, there's a lot of opportunity before us. We just have to take time and kind of look back and go, what is the opportunity in this marketplace? Because definitely there is opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the factors of having real estate in a declining market, purchasing real estate in a declining market. What do we need to even look for to determine if we are in a declining market? Anybody? How do we know? What are some economic indicators? Unemployment. Unemployment. That's a big one. So as a tax professional, that's one of the first things I see. Because clients come in telling me, Carla, I'm getting laid off. I'm getting severance. I've had 2 clients come in this year with that conversation. I don't know, but that's just been the conversation from some big employers. So that's one of the economic indicators. What else? So looking at the high-end real estate market, right? Because usually it takes a hit first. It drops substantially first, the high-end real estate market, right? So what are some things that we need to look at? Number one is when you're trying to see if a market is in a declining market, you got to look at things like the growth, right? Is there a growth market? And a growth market doesn't mean it's growing. It just started to go up. It's a market that has trended up over time. It may dip every now and then, but it's trending up over time. You're in a growth market. I can certainly tell you, I've been in California all of my life. I bought my first piece of property in California for $75,000. And I don't know where you can get a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in California right now for $75,000, right? So California is definitely a growth market. At any given time, can that market turn a different direction? Yes, it can, but it's typically a growth market. Other things that you want to look at is not only jobs, but does that area that you are investing in, what is the industry like in that area? The industry. Do you guys know what I mean by when I say industry? What is California known for in terms of industry? Somebody said trucking. What else? Tech industry. What else? The top 5 in California are tech industry. Right? That's one of the top 5. You want to know how I know this? Because I Googled it before I left my office. Don't think I'm that smart. Tech industry is one. The film industry is another. The film industry, right? We got Hollywood here. Everybody wants to go to Hollywood, which just cracks me up, right? So we have that. We also have agriculture here. That's huge in California. The service industry is huge in California. The service industry is one that is really huge in California. Tech, agriculture, the service industry is huge here. And then the rest of it was kind of like all over the map. So you have to say to yourself, when you're thinking about investing somewhere, what industries are there? Do you want to invest in a place that has one industry? Why? Interesting. So she's saying that you want to invest in a place where there's multiple industry. So I think that, to your point, yes, to your point, you're kind of talking about a local market when you're saying Burbank and the film industry in Burbank. But I think that when you're investing, you can look at the city, you could look at the county, and you can start to span out, right? So, for example, when people invested like in the car industry, right? The car industry was in Michigan. When the car industry went crazy, what happened? That area went down substantially because it was known for that particular industry. I would say for me, I want to invest someplace where there's multiple industries, right? It's almost like the teeter-totter. What am I investing in? Am I just allocating my resources strictly to people that are in the car industry? Because the car industry goes down, we know what's going to happen with that. So industry becomes important for you to look at that as you're thinking about investing. I have clients that ask me every day, Carla, should I invest out of state? I don't know. Should you invest out of state? I'm not here to answer those questions for you, but I am here to give you a little bit of food for thought. So when you're thinking about a declining market, what are some of the things that you have to be concerned about in a declining market? What are the risk factors? Because there's opportunity in a declining market, but what are some risk factors that you need to look at? Property value, right? Values. Why is that important? If your value starts dipping, what will happen? Okay, you might not be able to refinance if your value drops, right? We make our money on property the day we buy it. That sets the cost of the property. That probably sets the loan amount of the property. If values start dropping, you're not going to be able to necessarily refinance that property. The value is not sitting there anymore, right? That's something to consider. When you're going into a down market, you have to look at that because everything is going to be based on the price, the acquisition price, which you purchased that property for. That's really, really important. I remember when the real estate market really took a dip. What year was that? Right after 2006, was it 2007, 2008? When the real estate market really took that big dip, values dropped substantially. People couldn't get their properties refinanced. All their equity was gone overnight. They were thinking they could cash out, refinance, and take that money and do something else. There was literally no money to get. So you got to kind of think about that. How highly leveraged, meaning how much am I getting in a loan, and am I close to my property values? Will my property value decline? That's something that you have to think about. Are your property values? And when you're thinking about your property values, when does value really matter? When you sell, right? So if you're going to be in a buy and hold strategy, property values are not going to really matter to you that much when you're in a buy and hold strategy, right? If you're flipping property values will matter, but maybe not in the short run, because maybe the market is not dipping fast enough for you not to be able to make your money on your flip. But if your investment strategy is to buy, cash out, refi, buy another property, that might not be the strategy if you're in a declining market. So just something for you to consider, something for you to think about. The other big thing that I am going to tell you to really focus on and kind of consider is, what is your exit strategy? What's your exit strategy? When I buy real estate, I always think about how I am going to exit the property. What's my strategy when I buy real estate? What's the exit strategy? How do I get out of it? If I choose to get out of it, and anything can happen, right? Anything can happen at any given time. So you need to know what your exit strategy will be. It's easy to get in real estate. It's not that easy to necessarily get out of real estate. So you got to think about the exit strategy. When the market dipped before, I can just tell you, I saw people literally, they were walking away from their primary residence, going down the street buying other primary residence, right? They were literally having to abandon properties because their tenants left, right? No jobs, no money. People are going to go where the jobs are. So that's something that we have to consider. You got to know how to exit a piece of property. Like, how would you get out of it if you needed to? Would you rent to own to somebody? Would you sell it and carry back a note for somebody? How would you get out of the property? And not to say that's what you would do, but if you've already thought it through, if something were to happen, you won't be in such a panic mode, right? You're kind of know, okay, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do over here. I would sell it and I would carry back a note, or I would just flip out of it, or I would go in and partner with somebody to help carry the property. There's different things that you can do, but when people are under pressure, they don't think straight, right? When you're under pressure, you have a tendency not to think straight. But if you can come up with some different exit strategies before you buy the property, that's going to give you a little bit more leeway in the event that something transpires. Does anybody have any comments on that? Does anybody have any strategies that they've used when the market has dipped on a piece of property? No? You guys are all buy and holds? Everybody in here has been a buy and hold person? So you never had to flip out of a property fast? You guys are lucky people, right? Because you guys must be real seasoned, right? Been in the market for a while. The newbie investors had to flip out because they were over leveraged, right? A lot of people are over leveraged. So that's the second thing you want to look at. You want to know about the exit strategy and what you need to do in the event that you need to exit property, right? What are you going to do? And one other thing that I will tell you that I do for property is I have what I call money rules. And so money rules are about how much am I going to allow myself to be leveraged on property in terms of how much I need to come out of my pocket. And what I mean by that is when you're buying property, whether it's single family, whether it's commercial, you're going to have vacancies from time to time, right? You're going to have vacancies. Depending on how leveraged that property is, you may need to come out of your pocket on a monthly basis to keep that property moving. But you have to say to yourself, have some rules around that. How much am I willing to come out of my pocket on a monthly basis to keep this property performing? How much am I willing to come out on a monthly basis to keep a piece of property performing? The reason why I say that to you is because when your rental income, and that's our next conversation, when rental income drops, if property values drop, jobs leave, you will ultimately are going to have to drop rents because the rents will not sustain itself. They are not going to sustain itself. And tenants will move for an extra $15 a month in savings. They will move. And they won't even tell you they moved because the person down the street is so desperate, they will take them and they'll just leave you with a vacant piece of property. So when you are thinking about purchasing real estate and thinking about getting into multiple pieces of property, how much could you come out of your pocket to sustain those properties? Are you willing to come out of your pocket on a monthly basis, $500, $1,000, $2,000? How much do you have available and extra cash flow on a monthly basis to come out of your pocket? Those are things that you absolutely have to consider, right? Because if you are fully tapped out every single month, then that's something to think about. You can't afford to come out of your pocket. I got to keep my property full, right? But if your money rule is, I can sustain maybe 25% of what it costs me to run my properties, or 10%. So if your monthly outlay to run your properties is, say, for example, $5,000, 10% is $500, right? If your monthly outlay to sustain your properties is $50,000, 10% is $5,000. How much can you sustain on a monthly basis? And the reason why you want to know that number is because if you have to shift your portfolio, right, and you know that you can only sustain a certain amount per month, if your numbers start dipping beyond that, you got to make a decision quicker. When a market is dropping, rental income goes down. When rental income goes down, that affects your cash flow, right? That affects your ability to refinance. That affects your ability to keep your properties up. That affects a lot of things when rental income starts dipping. It affects your ability to sell. When rental income dips, you're not going to be able to sell for what you thought, especially a piece of investment property, because it's highly tied to how much rents you're getting from that property. Are you guys following me? So we want to be careful with that and really pay attention to it. Are rents dropping in that area? How do you find out if rents are dropping in the area? Do you talk to the property manager? Property manager is a good person that could tell you, right? Are rents dropping in the area? What else is a good way to look?
Look at the signs in the area.
Yep, look at the signs. If you start to see rents drop, you start to look at that type of stuff. Rents are starting to drop. Why are rents dropping? What's going on, right? Those are good indicators. Like we could find out a lot of this stuff on our own by using Google. When I started with investment properties, they didn't have Google. So we had to do drive-bys and we had to look and do all that sort of stuff. But now there's so much information that we can get on the internet and we can look stuff up. But definitely talking to a property manager is really important. Talk to a property manager. I like to call around to vacant properties that are near my properties to find out what they're renting for, right? I like to do that. I like to walk around. If I see a tenant walking, I want to have a conversation with that tenant. I'm like, oh, how often do they raise rents here? Oh, they haven't raised rents in a really long time, or they raise every, so many months, or every year they raise our rents. You're going to get some information just by asking some questions. So it's really important that you know that. Now, something else that we need to consider is rentability. If that market starts to dip, what if you can't rent the property, right? Can you even get the property rented? That's why it's important that if you are going to take an opportunity notice I said an opportunity, to buy in a declining market, you might want to consider, obviously, location, right? I always feel like if I'm going to go into a declining market, I look at that as an opportunity market. I want to buy someplace where I know there's a lot of people that are looking to rent. Maybe it's near a school. Maybe it's near casinos. I don't know. But I will tell you, when Vegas took a dip, I went to Vegas and I brought a lot of property. People were leaving. I went and bought, right? So why did I do that? Because I know that casino workers and people in no area, they need a place to live. Maybe they can't necessarily live in the house, but they can probably rent. But they probably want to rent closer to where they work. So those are things that you have to consider. Did that work out to be a good strategy? It did for that opportunity, right? It did work out to be a good strategy. When people are exiting, I want to go there and look and see what's the opportunity, right? What should we be looking at? So those are some considerations. Now, if you can't rent your property, what happens if you can't rent that property? You got to pay the upkeep. What else? Yeah. But something else that happens when we can't rent properties and they're left vacant. You can't pay your mortgage, but you might not even have a mortgage, right? Your properties end up getting vandalized. Vacant properties get vandalized. So you don't want to have an asset sitting empty like that. You want somebody in there, right? That's why we all leave our lights on when nobody's home. We want people to think that there's somebody in there. Well, when vacant properties are left empty, people break into them. People take the appliances out of them. Sometimes I remember I had a property, they took the copper piping, the cabinet doors. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? So the worst thing possible is to have your assets sitting vacant. It's not just you losing rents, but you may be also losing the actual value of that asset even more, because the rehabbing of that asset may be more than you want to pay for. So that's a huge thing that we have to consider. So what would be the strategy if we had to get somebody in the property? What would we do? Lower rents, right? I've lowered rents down a lot because I wanted to keep that tenant in there. I want a warm body in that property, right? As they say, oatmeal is better than no meal. I happen to like oatmeal, just so you know, right? You want somebody in there. You got to consider that. Do I want that tenant out? Something to consider, because you don't want your asset destroyed, right? You don't want that to happen. It's very important. And I don't know this to be true. I don't, but it's just something that popped in my head. When there's a lot of vacancies in an area, maybe somebody in the room knows the answer to this. When there's a lot of vacancies in an area and insurance companies are having a lot of claims, do they raise their premiums in that area? I don't know the answer to that. But just something to consider, right? Now you may end up having claims on your insurance because they've destroyed your property and you need to put that in as a claim. And now what, right? So all your costs start to increase. So you definitely want to consider rentability when you are in a declining market. Rentability is a big deal. Something that you certainly want to focus on. And then the fifth thing that you want to focus on is tenant quality. Who are these people that we're putting in our properties? I can tell you the worst horror story I ever had was I had a property in Florida, and everybody looks good on the application, right? Everything looks good on the application. I honestly think that these tenants have a way of falsifying their credit scores. I don't know that to be true, but I really do believe that. So I had this property in Florida. It was in an area that was declining at the time, and it was when the market was dipping. And the tenants left the property, of course, unbeknownst to me, right? The property manager was just like, they're not paying their rent. I'm like, have you communicated with them? Have you gone to the property? Have you checked it? Lo and behold, they left. They took my cabinets. They took the bathtub. They took the rail to the staircase, right? I'm like, really? The rail to the staircase? That's something I'm telling you. It's just an amazing thing that happens. So who are these people that do that type of stuff? Right? Who are these people that we're renting to? Do we really know who they are? We really don't. But I would imagine if a neighborhood is going down and jobs are leaving, the people that are left may not necessarily be the people that we really want to rent to. Because I want to rent to people that are employed and employable. Right? People that are necessarily working every day. I don't know. But that certainly happened to me. So my motto now when it comes to that type of stuff is to really do a double take on properties that I'm purchasing in a declining real estate market, because the quality of your tenant determines whether you can get the tenant out, whether the tenant's going to stay there for a long time, whether the tenant's going to destroy your property. Some of these tenants, you can't even pay them to leave, right? They won't even go even if you pay them, and then they destroy your property. I can tell you this though, other states, like I've done business in several states, Nevada, Florida, the Colorado, I've invested in a lot of different states. Those states don't have the same laws they have here in California, that's for sure. The tenants move faster, but they do destroy your property quicker. I've seen that. And I think maybe because, I don't know the reason, but I just think here in California, we're so butt up against each other, right? That you can't really get away with that. People will see you. It's a little bit different when you go to different places. The properties are not as close together. So maybe they have more opportunity. I don't know. I haven't had that experience here in California on a rental property being destroyed like that. So it's just something for you guys to consider. That's the worst horror story I've had with rental property being destroyed. But at the end of the day, we're investors, so that's just the game that we're in, right? So we have to deal with it. That's why I will tell you, just make sure you have the proper insurance coverage. Don't play around with the insurance. Have the proper insurance coverage, because the moment something happens and your insurance company doesn't cover you, you're in for, a rude awakening. Get the proper insurance coverage. Certainly don't be cheap on that. It's an investment in the future of your property, really. Something to consider there. Okay, so one other thing I just want to comment on is, what do you think that you should think about in terms of a declining market? What should you do if you find yourself in a declining market? Like, how should you handle that? Should you just liquidate your property and go? What do you guys think you should do? So you say, look at your cash flow and see if you can handle it, right? Or what solutions you could take. And you said, and this gentleman over here, he said, write it out, right? There's no right or wrong answer to that. Because maybe some of you can afford to write it out, but maybe others can't. It depends on how much cash you have available to ride it out. It's just going to depend. I don't want you guys to get locked in on a particular answer to that question, because the answer to that question is truly going to be predicated upon you and your unique situation. There's no right or wrong answer. Some of you can afford to write it out. Some of you are like, I got to jump out immediately, right? So the key truly is you absolutely have to have a strategy. You gotta have a strategy in place when you're dealing with real estate. And you gotta make sure that you're always looking at your strategy. If you are a seasoned investor, you have a lot of real estate that's paid for, well, you probably could write it out, because you know what? I could write it out. I don't have anything else to do. I can manage my properties. My cash flow is good on my other properties. I can absorb it. But if you are just getting in this market and you cannot afford to do that, you need to figure out some things that you need to do. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips on some things that you really need to look out for, things that I would do if I was in that situation. So number one is that I would say to you, make sure that you ultimately have your strategy in place based on you. Like, we can be hopeful that the market is going to come back, but what you know for sure is how much cash you have in your pocket, right? That you know for sure. We can't predict what the market is going to do. I don't think there's one person out there that can predict that. So you need to make sure that you have a strategy based on you. How much cash do I have? How long can I sit on this piece of property? The next thing that I would make sure that I do is I want to be ahead of it. How can you find out if a market is going to turn? What are the economic indicators, right, that you need to look at? But how can you become aware of those economic indicators before they are published in the public or before you see them on the news? How do you do that? You could keep your eye on financial news. You could, right? You can find out in any city that you are investing in. You can go to that city department and find out what developments they have coming. Cities know if businesses are going to exit. Cities have relationships with businesses. They know what's going on. There's a planning department pretty much in every city. You want to know what's going on in your city. You can attend city council meetings. You want to read the planning department reports. Find out, is somebody new coming to town? When new businesses are coming to town, they are negotiating with these businesses to come, right? Because most cities, counties get revenue off the sales tax. So they know who's coming. That's their job. They got to forecast that type of stuff for housing and all of that stuff. They know what type of contracts are out there, where builders are looking to build. So there's a lot of information that's out there if you're willing to look at it, right? So that's something that you want to look at. Being that my business is in the city of La Palma, anytime businesses are leaving the city of La Palma, I know about it, right? If they're a big business, why are they leaving? When Arco left the city of La Palma, I knew Arco was leaving probably 3 years before they left, because the city knows they're leaving. Like, they talk about those things. They try to negotiate with them to keep them there. So you can look at that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, in order for you to really put that strategy in place, if you are invested in any city, any location, Google and find out what happened the last time the real estate market dropped. What was the reason it dropped? What jobs left? Google that. Look at the historical data, right? Historical data may not necessarily repeat in the past, but that's going to kind of tell you what happened. Find out about that. Always look at what has transpired in the past, right? I would literally Google what happened the last time Florida real estate market dropped, what jobs left, what industry left. You want to find those things out. We can Google that and find it out. Then always have your fingers on the pulse of where the market is right now. Where's the market right now? Check rents, check property values. As a real estate investor, we should always be looking at values. I know I do. I'm always looking at values. If something goes up in my neighborhood, I'm going to know about it. I always am talking to different realtors. Hey, what do you have available? What is that priced at? What is the price per square footage? Just start being aware of those things. No one has to tell you. You could do a little homework on yourself and you'll start to see little indicators that way. Know what's going on. And then stay true to your vision. Don't get caught up on what other people are doing, right? Don't get caught up. If your vision is to hold your real estate and keep it, and you can afford to do that, hold your real estate and keep it. Just because your friends are selling, oh girl, I sold mine. Okay. A lot of my friends sell their properties in Vegas. Carla didn't sell hers. She went and bought more property, right? I wrote it out. And because I wrote it out, It just happened to work out. But I had the resources to write it out. When I was first investing, I probably would have sold it too. I didn't have the resources in the very beginning. So you certainly, definitely want to know what the market is doing by staying on top of little things like that. And then you want to make sure that you implement the right strategies for you. That's really important. Implement the right strategies for you. When you purchase real estate as an investment, that piece of property needs to operate on its own, right? It's like when you buy a car, in the simplest terms, when you buy a car, you expect that car to go. You expect that car to take you to point A to point B. You don't leave that car parked and buy another car and then swap out the tires on this car that's not working, right? The piece of real estate needs to stand by itself. So if you have a piece of real estate that's not performing, not doing what it should do, you need to look at that and see what you want to do about it. And then at the end of the day, you want to make sure when it's all said and done that it's a continuous monitoring. If you're a real estate investor, that's your business. You got to stay on top of your business. You got to know what's going on. Nothing should ever shock you about your real estate because you need to stay on top of it. Be aware. Have your awareness up on what's going on with your real estate, right? I would also say if you are a new investor, get with some of the people that are seasoned, right? They have the knowledge that you're not going to see anyplace else. It might not even be on the internet. They may have a strategy that you never even thought about. But pile up with people. Start going to different events where real estate investors are and meet them and make them your new best friend, right? Anybody willing to buy me dinner after this? I'll talk to you about real estate, right? You want to do that because they have little nuggets that they can share with you. So that's really what it's about. It's always going to be about strategy. It's always going to be about being thoughtful, being strategic, doing some research, and then asking questions. But at the end of the day, it's your property, right? At the end of the day, it's your property. You got to figure out what's the best strategy for you, not your friends, not your neighbors. Vet it out. And just remember that anytime that you are making any type of decisions, vet those decisions out with somebody that gets it, right? Run the numbers. If you can't run the numbers yourself, get somebody to run the numbers for you. Get some help. Be humble, right? Don't be embarrassed about asking people questions. Honestly, if I need help with something, I don't care who knows what my problem is. I want the person with the solution to find out about my problem. So I might have to put up a billboard. I'm over embarrassment of anything going on in my world. So I would just say that to you guys. All right.